Welcome everybody to Brain Food Live on Air, episode 277. Bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. This time from sunny Hong Kong, where it's about to get mega humid. I am not in prison. I'll have to let you know. I'm just in front of my mum's house, and these are just security bars. Anyway, great to have you with us today. I just want to check a few things. Want to make sure the audio and visual is okay. I know that basically we had a terrible disaster last week, basically, where we couldn't get everyone on screen all right, and we couldn't hear anybody. So I want to make sure that you can hear and see me okay. Just checking on the audio. Let me know in the comments if the audio is fine. In the meantime, I hope this is going live in other places as well. In Hong Kong, for instance, in LinkedIn, should I say, we should be live streaming there also. Okay, cool. Looks like everything is all fine. Audio is good. Thank you, Matt. I do appreciate that. I do think it's like super high risk whenever I do anything like this. But anyway, wonderful to have you on the show. Matt, I'm going to bring you on straight away because there's no need to mess around. Let's talk about hiring in Hong Kong. Andrew, once I see you on screen, I'll also try and bring you on as well. But right now, I don't think you're in the live audience. So let's start with Matt, and we'll see how we go. Cool. Let's see. You should get an invite. Yes, we're live also on LinkedIn and on YouTube, would you believe? Let me just check whether X is firing away. Looks like I am as well. Cool. Listen, so for the folks who are here, here's Matt. Hello, Matt. How are you? Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. God damn. Is that me or anybody else? You know, all the configs go off whenever we go and travel. Can you hear me okay, Matt? Yeah, I think you can hear me, can you? But I can't hear you for whatever reason. Oh. Come again, Matt? Can you say something? No? Okay, how strange. Let me boot you off and see if I can bring you back on. See, maybe that'll help. Give me a sec. Cool. The amazing benefits of live streaming, folks. You don't always get everything right. Let's see if we can bring Matt back on, and hopefully we'll get some audio going on here, and we should be able to hear okay. Who else is here? Someone commentating? Yeah, Andrew. Okay, cool. I can see you. Let me bring you on, Andrew. I don't know why you can't see anything. I suspect there'll be a problem here as well. Matt, I also think there's going to be an issue with regards to your audio, I'm afraid.
Right.
Oh, no, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Excellent. Good to see you, Matt.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Hasn't been that long since we last caught up, maybe a month or so, 6 months or so since I was last here. So actually a very good opportunity for us to reconnect and see how the market has been for you. So before we kick off, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, Matt?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt Gollop. I'm Managing Director of Connected Group. We're a 55-person executive search recruitment business based out of Hong Kong, covering a wide range of industries, functions. We also have a HR consulting, wellness business. We do contracting, launching a SOW business next year.
Fantastic stuff. Wonderful to have you there. And we also have Andrew here. Andrew, great to see you, sir. Wonderful to have you on the show. Hopefully, he's disappeared as I've just said that. I don't know why that was. Oh, there he is. Camera switch. I love it. Andrew, can you hear me okay? I don't think he can. No, but that's okay. Let's wait until he fills his way into this, and we should be in good shape.
Can you hear me, Andrew?
Calling that. Let's go here. No, I think Andrew's basically off. I'm gonna have to mute him because I can hear him as he's typing away. But let's do that. So let's sort of kick off, Matt. How is the so tell me about the recruiting stuff that you do, and what is it that you can tell us?
I mean, we have good insight in the sense that we cover quite a wide range of industries and functions. So we have quite broad coverage, predominantly Hong Kong talent within Hong Kong into Hong Kong from regional and global, and then some search around the region, China predominantly, and North Asia. The market has been tough. I mean, I think it's been similar everywhere else. We're obviously impacted by the same geopolitical, macroeconomic issues that everybody else is, and we've had our own systemic issues here. We've had an outflow of talent, which the market is only just beginning to recover from. We've seen a bit of a localization of the market. We've lost some regional offices of corporates that have moved out. At the same time, we are seeing the beginnings of maybe some turnaround, and government has been very active with stimulus measures. We've seen China also, recently drop interest rates and become much more active, trying to boost the economy. Hong Kong very well positioned with EV manufacturers coming in to try and grow globally. Battery tech is a growth area. The big institutions here are investing, education sector very strong, and we definitely see that sort of research ecosystem around a lot of technologies and academia as a big growth area in the future. So Hong Kong beginning the rebound, but we'll certainly come out of it looking maybe different to what it did before, which was probably an over dependence on financial services. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, really interesting, Matt, because you've obviously been in Hong Kong for a very long time now. So you've seen the transformation, I guess, in different types of sectors and what have you. And for folks who don't know, basically financial services generally has been a major driver. Financial services and probably real estate have probably been the two things that have really been driving Hong Kong economy, plus tourism, you can say, maybe for the last sort of 20, 30 years. The light manufacturing had long since moved across the border, hadn't it? And so the Hong Kong economy financialized quite heavily, and that's obviously not been sort of the same thing. So very interesting to hear you say this. Tell us about the particular local conditions that you think are specific to Hong Kong, and what you've encountered as an owner of a recruitment business, for instance. Like how have these sort of bigger macro changes impacted things locally, and what are the specific local things that people need to be aware of here?
Yeah, I think obviously from a macro perspective, it followed a similar trend, right, which was post-COVID. Everybody realized it maybe wasn't as bad as they thought. 2022 was this boom year where for the first 9 months at least everybody was hiring like crazy, and then realizing towards the end of 2022 maybe we need to be a bit more conscious about what the new normal is going to look like. And then when 2023 hit, the border opened fully with China. There was a sudden realization that actually the economy is not very good in China either, and confidence dropped, and obviously we had soaring interest rates everywhere. So that we went through that same cycle. I think what has impacted Hong Kong more deeply is a couple of things that I touched on before. One is that post the political unrest and then COVID, we had a lot of departures from Hong Kong, both in terms of local talent and also expatriate talent. We also had some organizations moving regional headquarters away from Hong Kong, de-risking. There are some concerns around data laws and things like that has pushed a few international law firms away from Hong Kong, for example. So we've been through this period of conservatism. Nobody can really say, well, what does the future look like? What is that? How is Hong Kong going to rebound from this situation? So I think those things have added something challenging, and then within that, organizations have localized. So that means we've lost expatriate talent. Teams have become more local. Cantonese has actually become the internal business language in some teams, and that has created challenges for diversity to bring talent into those organizations, because they've got used to conversing internally within the local language, which is understandable, but is a barrier to new talent coming on board. And so we've seen this kind of sort of push and pull, and what that leads us into is probably a period of a very difficult period where people are going to need more talent, but the pool is very thin, so organizations are going to have to think about diversity again, hiring from overseas, and government is driving that very hard. Top Talent Pass scheme is an easy visa entry scheme for people from a list of 186 universities now, and which is very different to Singapore, where organizations are really struggling to get employment passes for non-PR because of all of the quotas and everything they have to fulfill. So I think we're in a turning point where we all sort of start to come out of this, but there's definitely some systemic issues in there to deal with for sure.
Yeah, you know what? Let's talk about the Hong Kong Top Talent Permit Scheme, because that's one of the questions I actually received from a panelist that couldn't make it, and she wanted to actually talk about this. So tell us what this is. And by the way, folks, it's actually quite a common, even though there's local conditions, whenever I'm speaking to different people in different territories, I am finding some very similar conversations, such as a talent shortage. In other words, there may be labor available, but the talent shortage in the particular places is still very acute. It almost doesn't matter where you are. I was in Thailand, I've been in Melbourne, Sydney, I'm now in Hong Kong. Same stories. Like, yes, there's like bodies available, but have they got the skills needed for these specific jobs? Actually, no. And then there's a need to import them. So there's also this immigration conversation needs to be had. But let's focus on the Hong Kong Top Talent Permit. What does this involve? Do you know anything about it, Matt? And have you made use of it?
Yeah, Top Talent Pass Scheme is basically an early visa process, right? So before you had to, there were a few sort of academic routes in, but other than that, you had to get a employer to sponsor the visa basically before you could then enter the country. This scheme gives 3 different criteria of people the opportunity to get a visa in advance of arrival. So it should make it easier for them to secure employment. One is you earn over 2.5 million Hong Kong dollars a year. So they're obviously trying to attract sort of higher net worth individuals. And then there's 2 bands below that, which is different levels of experience in sort of lower to mid professionals who come from originally a list of top 100 universities that's now been expanded to 186, I think, at last count. So the criteria is fairly simple. You qualified, you've got a degree from one of these universities. I think it's you have at least 2 years experience in the last 3 is the lower bracket. Then you get the visa. They've issued about 90,000 of those visas. It's probably more now, maybe over 100,000 of those visas. The challenge is there's not the jobs. And for 2 reasons. One, conditions, the macro conditions we talked about. And 2, a lot of these candidates obviously not Cantonese speaking, and we do have that limitation in the market. So the government is pushing from one end, employers are still quite conservative, but at least there is a pent-up supply, because we're going to need that supply as the market starts to pick up. But organizations are having to start thinking about, how do I diversify my talent base, and how do I prepare myself to induct people from different cultural backgrounds? Because even coming from mainland China into Hong Kong is quite different if they haven't worked in Hong Kong before.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So I love how you've sort of described the difference between the government push. The government kind of sees the need to get more people in, and the expansion of this visa seems to be very, very intelligent. And by the way, any recruiter will be aware of this. It's like if the employer needs to sponsor a visa, it basically is more or less a hard shut for a lot of candidates. I mean, you're not, as a recruiter, you immediately have a problem from an administrative point of view. So if you're able to push the sponsorship out beyond the need for the job, then of course that opens the door. And you've just got to moderate how that works. But very interesting to say that, yes, so there might have been a period of, let's say, indigenization, if you want to call it, where the language moved to certainly Mandarin, then to Cantonese, let's say, local language. English language use maybe is dropping off, but actually you might need to recover that, because the sort of inbound sort of people that are coming in are highly unlikely to know Cantonese unless they themselves are diaspora, or perhaps from countries that have large Cantonese speaking populations. Maybe Malaysia, I'm thinking, would be an example of that. But yeah, very, very interesting. What about the sectors, Matt? So you're saying finance, sort of there may be a period where the economy is rebalancing away from finance. That's going to be a big ask, isn't it? Because Hong Kong is massively into the finance side. What are you seeing in terms of the hiring that's going on in the finance sector, and where else? What are the sectors that are absorbing the talent that no longer wants to work in there or can work in there?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think obviously what we see is the big international sell side banks are very conservative everywhere, and so they've been downsizing. We've had Credit Suisse, UBS merger, and still fallout from that. And I think on that side, that's where we see the most loss of jobs. We also see a lot of outsourcing or offshoring of more process-driven, back office functions, which has been ongoing over the last 15 years in Hong Kong to lower cost locations. So I think we'll continue to see more of that. The buy side has been a bit more positive, and so sort of asset management. Some of the smaller hedge funds, etc. They've been active, and so there's been a shift of some of that talent from sell side to buy side where they can, and obviously sort of fintech has been absorbing some of that as well. But there are, particularly around, I would say, more traditional technology and more traditional operational roles within the bigger banks. That's where a lot of the unemployed people sit right now, trying to work out, how do they retool and reposition themselves to make a move. And then, investment banking has been very quiet. IPOs are thin on the ground, although we are starting to see them come back to Hong Kong. We're also seeing Beijing for the first time quite overtly say, if you're going to go set up a global headquarters, go to Hong Kong, list in Hong Kong, do it from there, and grow globally from that international hub, which we'd not seen before. It was a route, but it wasn't something that the Beijing government really promoted. So that's a positive. That's not necessarily going to massively benefit the big international banks, because we'd already seen IPOs moving more to the mainland banks anyway. So they might tag on a Goldman's or a Morgan Stanley to give a bit of kudos to the IPO, but they're not really the lead as they were 10, 15 years ago. And then the property market is messy. The commercial property market here is significantly down, and that's impacting big real estate companies because their valuation is based on their asset value, and their liquidity is linked to that and everything else. So we've seen sort of a few big stories of leadership changes and different issues. So there's a lot to shake out in that space as well. There'll be opportunities that come from that, but we're still in the valley at the moment. I think we will start moving out of that in the next few months, hopefully.
Yeah, I totally get that sense. When an economy does try and shift its major levers, there's going to be huge fallout. And like I say, opportunity for those organizations and people agile enough to take advantage of them. But a lot of people that may have kind of invested heavily, or maybe a different part of their career, different life sort of the stage, it's going to be tough to shift. One thing about recruiters, though, is that we definitely should be very agile. I mean, we're always very good at pivoting sector by sector. Andrew, I'm going to bring you on a sec, because I'd love to hear your rec-to-rec kind of view on this. Like, what is the talent sort of distribution is going to be for recruiters? But yeah, no question, big changes. And also with regards to general offshoring, that is happening in any kind of corporate or financial institution. Like, we're seeing it everywhere, where essentially I think remote has taught everyone that actually you can get rid of a lot of these jobs to cheaper locations. And we're seeing a lot of the middle and back office of almost every situation being pushed further out to cheaper locations. I had a conversation with a recruiter in the UK, and she was saying, look, every single job requisition, I guess, gets raised in her business, which is a multinational organization, has to first go through that screen, can it be offshored? And you think, okay, if every single job gets kind of through that analysis, then actually a lot of those information carrying jobs, ticking and bashing type stuff, yeah, I can go, so interesting indeed. What about tourism, Matt? So tourism, I always thought kind of hung on the back of a little bit of the financial wealth and stuff like this. Also, the accessibility of Hong Kong with the general English language friendly kind of culture. I get the sense that tourism being mega hammered of late. And I see two kind of reasons for this. You tell me what your thoughts are. Number one, I think obviously the COVID moment was really devastating for Hong Kong in particular on the tourism side. And secondly, what I'm seeing is also the rise of competition in different places, like the competition, for instance, in Vietnam or in Thailand, 2 hours away and basically a lot cheaper. and now increasingly more accessible with regards to international travelers. Where do you see this sort of looking for Hong Kong? Is tourism dead here and is it finished, or do we need to get rid, or is there a way to recover it in some way?
I think external. I mean, obviously, a lot of the tourism was from mainland, right? So a lot of mainland Chinese coming to Hong Kong, and there was this period where people would come here and just spend a lot of money because Hong Kong was actually cheaper for a lot of things. The taxes on luxury goods was much lower in Hong Kong than the mainland, and so people would come here, they would spend a lot of money, and that's the type of tourists that you would try and attract. COVID happened, wealth profiles changed. People had probably done their time in Hong Kong and started looking elsewhere. The currency in Japan was weak, so therefore that was a cheap location. So you had all of these factors, which meant that as the tourists started coming back to Hong Kong from mainland China, they were a different profile. They were younger, they had less disposable income. They see Hong Kong as kind of quite a quaint place. It's not as technologically advanced as mainland China now, which is something a lot of people from externally may not realize. And so they come here and they find Instagram spots to take photos from old movies and all of this kind of stuff. And I spoke to somebody in the consumer space who said, they own multiple different brands. He said, we're not making our money in luxury watches anymore, but we can sell swatches by the box load because it's a different it's just a different consumer that's coming here. And then internationally, I mean, I think Hong Kong just has a question mark hung over it because of some of the instability that we've had here. And I think that will gradually stabilize and come back. But what we're also seeing here on the flip side is we're seeing a lot of outgoing tourism, i.e. the border is now open. It's very easy to get to Shenzhen. If you live up in the North New Territories, as you know, you can be 19 minutes, I think, is the closest on a bus to Shenzhen, and you can eat in an expensive restaurant for probably half the price as you can in Hong Kong, and that's impacting the F&B business here quite significantly.
Mate, I'm going there for lunch later today.
There you go. There you go. You're one of them. You're one of them taking your disposable income over the border.
That's true. I mean, basically, that's what I'm hearing from just my family. So I live I'm in the New Territories now, so very close to the border. But they're all saying, listen, when you go take this bus to over to Shenzhen, make sure you get there early because there's a massive queue of people doing it. And the reason why, I think the bus is like $2 or something to get over there, but everything once you're there is half the price, simply because like China is like really cheap. I didn't really realize this until I went up to the mainland in February, and I was like really surprised. Just everything was just like half the price, even down to a third of the price. So as that's opened up, it's going to draw a lot of Hong Kong tourists the other way, which is a massive sea change from when I first arrived in Hong Kong. It was all the mainlanders trying to come in rather than the other way around. So it's a big shift. But again, more competition, more throughput, and like I say, there's a lot of different things about Hong Kong. Hong Kong is different enough for it to be very attractive to the mainland tourists. As an aside, Kowloon Wall City, Matthew, you'd be aware of this. I don't know whether you ever went into it back in the day, but I am starting the campaign for it to be rebuilt because I think it's right now it's a park, right? And look, listen, parks are great, but it's a pretty boring park. And I'm saying if you rebuilt that in a more hygienic way, at least in some sort of way in which it's architecturally interesting and visitable, I believe it'll be a massive tourist attraction because it was one of the most incredible artifacts of Hong Kong back in the day. If you don't know, folks, just Google Kowloon Wall City. Once upon a time, the most densely populated area anywhere in the planet, simply because it was in between jurisdictions, I believe it was, and there was no one ruling it. The British government was ruling it, Chinese government was ruling it. It was a lawless city, and therefore all the cyberpunk stuff happened in there. So yeah, definitely check it out. Okay, let's see if I can bring Andrew. I'll keep you on here, Matt, because I want to make sure that get your brains attached to any of this, because where is the recruitment sort of work? And speaking from a business owner, where are you kind of firstly, where are you sourcing recruitment talent? Are there recruiters? Is there a body of recruiters here? Is it a case people have fled the scene and gone elsewhere? Do you need to train recruiters up locally? What's the story? Okay, let's say hi to Andrew. Let's hope we can do the audio. And how are you doing, Andrew?
Apologies for the good, thanks. Apologies for the previous technical issues. The beauty of technology, and probably lesson learned: always do a dry run the day before.
No, Andrew. I've been called out many times for never doing dry runs on Brainfood Live. The audience is simply going to have to roll with it. So great to have you with us, Andrew. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. So Andrew Ladamatis, British, came to Hong Kong early 2010, so almost 15 years ago. I used to recruit accounting and audit talent into banking and financial services, 2.5 years in London, contracting about 1.5 years in Hong Kong. And for some, in some moment of madness, 10.5 years ago, I decided to launch my own small rec-to-rec business, pretty much purely focusing on the market. Yeah, still questioning it as well. Yeah, 10.5 years later. So small office in Central. I place recruiters out all levels, functions, all industries. Again, primarily geographically in Hong Kong.
Really, really interesting, Andrew. Thanks for the download. And you're one of the people, because you are working in the rec-to-rec side, probably has a very, very interesting perspective in terms of how the hiring market has been going. We've heard from Matt talking about, the wider macroeconomic conditions, also the local issues that are affecting, how the economy is shifting and changing. What are you seeing with regards to sort of the recruitment demand? Like, can you take us through historically what it looked like? So pre-COVID, during COVID, and now, like, can you give us a bit of a timeline?
Yeah, sure. Very anecdotally, and this is probably just thinking about my own sort of performance, which doesn't always correlate to the market exactly. 2014 to 2019 was overall pretty good. I remember we had a little bit of a lull, sort of somewhere in 2016. If you look at the property price index, it dropped a bit then. 2019, a little bit of social unrest. I remember the latter half of that year was difficult, and a lot of recruiters that previously had been really, really busy and billing good numbers stopped billing, sort of Q3, maybe Q4 2019. 2020, we got smacked with COVID. That was a big scare. You started to see firms, remembering back, this is sort of 4 or 5 years ago, but I started to see firms starting to fire, downsize towards the end of 2019, about 6 months into the social unrest period. Then early 2020, COVID came and firms just did more of that, cut salaries. 2020, I think, was the first year I saw recruitment firms cut salaries anywhere from about 10 to 20% up to about 30, 40% on the whole. Obviously, exceptions outside of that. Towards the end of 2020, at least from my memory, the market started to actually come back, and I saw some people posting some okay numbers, Q3, Q4 2020, as I think people started to realize, like, let's get used to working in this new world of COVID. And I think by then, like, remote working was better set up, whereas Hong Kong, I think, has always been a bit behind, say, Western countries when it comes to setting people up for remote. 2021, 2022, broadly speaking, were really, really good years for most people in most spaces. And most, like, if I look at what recruitment firms demanded in terms of when they call me, they say we're looking for XYZ type of person. I think those 2 years, 2021, 2022, broadly speaking, firms were quite happy to hire good, hungry junior recruiters who maybe had 6 months to 2 years experience, who maybe didn't have a network or didn't have a network in the desk that they were going to be focusing on, but just had the right personality traits. That started to shift, I think, probably depends on who you ask, but I think really early last year. So we're talking almost 2 years ago, right? We're talking sort of 18, 19, 20, 21 months ago now, probably Jan, Feb last year, where I think all of a sudden firms just kind of stopped making as much money. Probably for me, the earliest warning signs, which were slightly before the start of 2023 was legal recruiters I speak to, and that's big part of the market here. Law firms hiring, and traditionally they've paid recruiters a lot of fees to hire associates and partners. Towards the end of 2022, that started to really slow down, and law firms just started to stop hiring or stop using recruiters to paying recruiter fees for them. So yeah, it's basically been, I heard the tail end of sort of some of what Matt Golub was saying, and I probably agree with it. It's especially in financial services, but across most sectors and functions, it's been a tough year and a half, almost 2 years for most people. And again, like it sounds very anecdotal, but guys I know who were maybe billing 3 to 4 million, 5 million Hong Kong dollars in 2021, 2022, that's 300 to 500,000 pounds a year, 10 to 1 is the exchange. They're maybe doing half, maybe 50, 60%, 65%. Probably what's bucking the trend is contracting. So I know a number of contracting recruitment teams in Hong Kong who have grown, probably because of the benefit of recurring revenue, maybe partly because of the benefit of just firms, banks, insurance clients, commercial firms being able to actually hire and actually get headcount for contractors when they couldn't get headcount for the equivalent perm function.
Yeah, that's a classic distribution of kind of an economy and economic stress, isn't it? Where basically it's very difficult to get any kind of perm headcount, fixed costs, not happening. But of course, work needs to be done, and that shifts into a rising contract rate. By the way, that's almost exactly the same story in the UK, where there's been like profit warnings for all of the businesses, particularly on perm desks. But it's on contract where there's some sparks of life. It's not booming, it's not crazy, let's grow, but that seems to be some growth, and that I think is maybe a permanent state, because you look at how the survey work that the likes of PwC and Deloitte typically do, where they survey the CEOs of their customers, and of course, these are some of the biggest firms out there, the biggest employers out there. Almost all of them say they want to expand the non-FTE population that they have in their businesses, because they obviously want the flexibility. We've had 2 to 3 years, 4, 5 years now. What am I saying? It's chaotic times, where it's very difficult to even have a strategy, because who knows what's going to happen in 6 months, 2 months, or whatever. So you need flexibility, and the flexibility of getting interim labor is a key part of that. Go back to Matt and Andrew, both of you guys, in terms of how that flexibility has it bled into recruitment? Like, are you seeing recruiters sort of saying, I'd prefer to work more flexibly, actually? Can I go on a no target, 60-40 comms only deal? I work with other companies, etc. Are you getting that type of vibe, or is it still search for people still want perm jobs in a recruitment agency? What are your thoughts, guys?
People ask me, do you have any part-time or more flexible recruitment jobs? It's always a really interesting topic. Good to see your view on this, Matt. I find that when people go and work in recruitment firms, but remotely or on zero base, they end up just not really making much money, and it kind of goes against the logic of what you think would happen. Because if I'm on a zero base, if I'm paid 50, 60, 70% of what I'm producing, versus including my base 30, 35, 40 cents on a dollar of what I'm producing, I'll always bill more, surely, if I'm incentivized more. But I think what ends up happening is there just ends up being sort of less of an agreed sort of commitment from both parties, and therefore people just end up relaxing more. And I think, as much as we always say recruitment's a job that you need to be super self-motivated, which definitely you do, I also think having a structure which requires you to either be in an office or at least be on your laptop at home at a certain time, roughly until a certain time, I think is conducive to actually doing well and actually making money. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I mean, I think over the years, through various ups and downs, we've seen these periods where I think we went through one back 2003, something like that, sort of in the middle of SARS and everything else. And as soon as you stop paying people and increase their commission, they're no longer an employee. They no longer feel part of the business. They don't feel the need to come into the office on time, or whatever it may be, or follow the system procedures, etc., etc. And so what you end up with is sort of an unraveling of culture, an unraveling of the infrastructure that you need to execute. And so I think it's just an industry where it doesn't seem to work, because if you are very effective at being self-motivated, why not take 100% commission and go do it yourself, right? So I think there's not a sort of middle ground in between, and we don't really see that work. I mean, we run a work from home policy of Mondays is work from home if you want to. We finish at 4 on a Friday, and we just try and drive a corporate behavior where there's a balance, and if you need to flexible on your time because you've got kids or whatever it is that pop up in life, that's absolutely fine. And I think people appreciate that, because they work in an environment where they're trusted, but there is still expectations on them to deliver certain processes along the way to get to the end result.
Very, very interesting. I mean, I think that it may well be something to do with life stage, I suspect. Like it could well be that, fractional working, for instance, is a topic I'm quite interested in, simply because as I'm getting older, I'm seeing a lot of my colleagues and friends and so on basically not have the appetite to come in and do a full-time job. Like they come into, I wouldn't say the end of their career, but they've probably topped out in terms of their objectives career-wise. It's like, you know what? I don't necessarily need to keep striving, do 8 hours a week or whatever. I've got other stuff I want to do. And it's a little bit of a downshift, but they don't want to end up sort of obviously taking a low status job and still be cracking for the full-time thing. So it's like kind of maintain the status, but not do the hours. It's a tricky balance to achieve. I think there's some people that have managed to do it. I wonder whether it'll come down to whether you've got, a mega network, as you mentioned, Andrew. A young person coming in, no network, not going to happen. But let's say you have built a network over 10, 15, 20 years or whatever, you could probably be a reasonable fractional recruiter, do 2 or 3 days, call it days, but it's really hours. You do 20 hours a week or whatever and still do okay. Very, very interesting. Okay, cool. What about the sectors that you guys see as being, high hopes going forward? Like, are you seeing anything particularly say, okay, maybe the first era of Hong Kong's kind of finished in this financial sector. Next era is going to look like this, and these are where, if you're a recruiter, you want to be trying to play. Any of these sort of sectors that spring to mind?
There you go. I think financial services will bounce back, right? So I don't have any doubt that it will continue to play a key role in the economy. At some point, property will come back, and so there'll be those more traditional economic anchors will still be there. But I think we will diversify, and what we'll see is definitely around anything that is in the hardware, software, sort of crossover, that firmware piece. So Internet of Things, battery technology, all of that kind of ecosystem. We're definitely seeing that already starting to evolve here, because I think the key is that as I said, these mainland companies are coming here to go IPO, to go global, and that brings with it a wider ecosystem as well. So I think anything that can kind of leverage Hong Kong's global position, financial sophistication, the strategy talent that you can find here, and that global outlook, and then it's on the border with China. The R&D and the manufacturing over the border in southern China. I think that's going to be a big growth space. So I think I would look towards anything that is driven around battery technology, Internet of Things, energy management systems, that type of stuff. I think will be quite key.
Thoughts on your side, Andrew? Go on.
Not too much to add. I mean, all I guess I see in front of me is where are people making money and where are people making less money in, functions and sectors, and where are people making more money. And I think like we keep talking in Hong Kong about like investment in technology and growth of technology sector, but I think most if you look at tech, like most people working in a technology job in Hong Kong are working in a function of technology within, say, a bank or a hedge fund or maybe a commercial firm. And I think we're yet to see people working, massive drugs or people working in technology companies, even though the government keeps promoting different schemes to push that. I think banking and financial services will remain as a big part of the economy here, but probably a smaller portion versus other sectors, which will continue to grow. Very, very simple view, I think, but who knows?
Yeah,
and think
very interesting.
Quickly in Hong Kong.
Tell me about the Greater Bay Area. So this is one of the big projects coming out of the mainland. It's the idea that obviously there's some clusters of real dense populations. There's Hong Kong, there's Shenzhen, there's Dongguan. There's all kinds of different places. Macau and Zhuhai, they're all right there. Each one of these have got like 5 to 15 million people, so it's massive, right? And I think the idea is to try and create some sort of like connected sort of a hub. So essentially infrastructure is connected, there's a lot of travel, a lot of throughput. Theoretically could be a massive boom, but it seems that perhaps it hasn't quite moved forward and in the way that perhaps people hoped. What are your thoughts on Greater Bay Area? Is it a white elephant? Is it a thing that people in Hong Kong can look forward to? Is something that is going to be a driver for economic growth?
Yeah, I think yes, I think it will be a positive. I think that that is the problem, as you just mentioned. We started talking about this 6 years ago, and it hasn't moved forward. But it hasn't moved forward because we had political issues. We had the COVID predominantly. The border got shut for an extended period of time. So that just kind of put everything on hold. And then when the border opened, we all had other issues to deal with in our own economies, and it hasn't really moved forward. But the infrastructure links are there, as we talked about. It's so easy now to get to China. They are working on the sort of visa scheme, gradually kind of making that easier for people to cross border and work in southern China as well. And I know that there is sort of work going on tax equalization schemes for expats, and so as these things start to mature, then it will create a bit more of a homogenous economy across all of those locations. And what we also see is that the big academic institutions in Hong Kong, which rank highly, we've got 4 top 100 universities here. They're all setting up Greater Bay campuses. So I think that will also build when you see the sort of the academic ecosystem developing, that will be a strong link. Standard Chartered building a big hub over there. HSBC have been over there for some time. So I think that there's a lot of potential. There's a lot more to come from that economic zone, but it's still yet to really coalesce into a list of 10 things that you can say absolutely this is what it's doing for us right now. But I think it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah, if I look at the recruitment sector, do I see increased number of people in the last few years? I think going from Hong Kong to cities like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Dongguan, not really, and vice versa. I think if I look at the last year, I see more people wanting to come down to Hong Kong from places like Shanghai, especially guys focusing on, say, financial services, just because it's very, very, very slow. But what would GBA look like in years? Like, no real strong view of where it will go.
I think that's also an interesting point, is that southern China has never been an attractive place for talent within China to go. You couldn't get people to move from Beijing to Shanghai. You couldn't get people to move from Shanghai to Shenzhen, and actually getting people to come to Hong Kong wasn't always as easy as you would think, because China was booming, and each of these markets had their own distinct positives and cultures. But now there's actually a lot of talent on the mainland that are much more open, because the market has become very difficult there as well. And they're much more open to opportunities in southern China, but also in particular Hong Kong. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, there was a bit of post-COVID sort of PTSD from the way that they locked people down there in their apartments for extended periods of time. And then the international education has had a lot of restrictions in China. And so people with young kids are looking at Hong Kong as a place with an international education sort of ecosystem that they can more easily plug into. So the Top Talent Pass scheme, all these things connected, do drive talent will drive talent to Hong Kong. So I think that's also a positive and something that we'll see impact that Greater Bay and Hong Kong positively in the future.
Looking at it from things on a demographic basis, all of East Asia, you hear about, look, everyone's got like demographic crisis, labor force replacement rate isn't there, et cetera, et cetera. So we're probably coming up to a point now where there is going to be this shortfall of people not only doing, so to say, that the high spec jobs that high salaried and so on, but even the basic stuff out there. All levels of society are going to basically lack for those people. Some countries have fixed this with immigration. We talked about this earlier, Matt, with the visa scheme. Do you think that's going to continue to extend? I mean, both of you and Andrew, try and give your thoughts on this. Do you think that's going to continue to extend, where there's going to be increased we're going to reduce the friction for people to come to Hong Kong and maybe try and compete for talent in Southeast Asia, let's say? Do you think it's going to draw people from the mainland to come here on that visa, perhaps? Or is there a different kind of scheme for people on the mainland? What are your thoughts on immigration, demographics, and so on here in Hong Kong?
I think yes. I think there's two things. One is, yes, we have an aging population in Hong Kong, but also they have that problem on the mainland as well. We see it in Japan, we see it in Singapore. So you fix that in two ways now. One is immigration, and two is automation. So whilst we do see a lot of offshoring, we also see that automation can actually resolve a lot of these problems. I mean, I think TikTok just laid off 480 people in Malaysia because they replaced those jobs with machine learning, basically. So I think we'll see this combination of two things, automation and immigration. And Hong Kong, in places like construction, where automation is not there yet to support that, they are trying to pull talent in, and non-Chinese speaking talent from other locations, right, to fill the gaps in construction talent. When you go to Japan and walk into convenience stores on the night shift, now you see Japanese speaking immigrants from India and Pakistan and places like that. So all these countries are having to look at how do you fill these early gaps in the talent portfolio as the population ages, and that's only going to then creep more into the sort of more sophisticated jobs over time, unless you pull talent in from overseas. So I think it's a mixture of things, but it's definitely a challenge for a lot of these economies. The only good thing is, in Asia, we are surrounded by places like Vietnam, the Philippines, who have very youthful populations that I think can be drawn upon to plug some of these gaps for us.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I do notice it even myself, sort of periodically visiting Hong Kong. So obviously, I don't have the experience you guys have, but just walking the streets in some of these like northern towns, which basically are almost like as homogenous as you can get, you are starting to spot different looking people, and I'm talking ethnically different looking people, and that seems to be more and more per year. So I assume that's got to mean immigration coming in, because basically as you say, populations are aging out, and they're not able to continue doing a lot of the work that needs to be done here. By the way, these society problems. A friend of mine mentioned this, like, look, social problems are beyond the control of any particular business owner or any particular profession, but ultimately these are problems that are positive for the recruiting industry in a way, because it means that there's demand for our services in that respect. Where there's a shortfall of labor, where there isn't a demand for recruiters, when there's a massive surplus of labor that is able, capable, willing, and in location to do the job that you want. So some of these social changes, even though they may be unwelcome, they do have a kind of a plus benefit for people in the recruiting space. Very good. folks, let's talk about sort of things that you got to know if you wanted to move to Hong Kong. Let's say there's people out there are watching this in the UK, they're watching it in different places, and they think, you know what, tired of this. I want to check out another location, maybe do a recruitment job over in Hong Kong. What do they need to know, like as people who've been here 10 plus years? Plus, you've got that experience of having been a worker in the UK in different culture as well. What kind of things do these people need to know in order to, smooth their way over here, so to say?
Love this question, and it's a question I wish I sort of was able to answer more, because I don't speak to so many people in the likes of places like London, Dubai, Australia that want to come here as much as maybe 4 or 5 years ago. When people used to ask me that, I always used to say, like, that first of all, Hong Kong is an absolutely fantastic place to live. There are so many benefits of living here and working in recruitment here. But I think the advice I give people about the mindset to have is you have to be culturally sensitive, and you have to be, I think, reflective and self-aware to deal with people where the majority of your candidates and clients probably won't be ethnically the same as you, and you have to be able to relate to those probably in a different way to what you would, how you'd relate to people in your home country. I think I always say to people, understand, like, Hong Kong is a very, very competitive place, and I don't think that just stands in the recruitment sector. I think it stands in all functions and sectors. Generally, it's a place where people are hungry, talented, aggressive, very, very career driven. Because I think if they weren't, a lot of those people wouldn't necessarily come and stay in Hong Kong. I always say to people, you could turn up to Hong Kong directionless and probably still land on your feet somehow, but it's probably better to get good at something first for a few years in your home country, specialize in something, get to a certain level, and then use that as a launch pad of skills and experience to come here, as opposed to sort of turning up as a grad or turning up to play rugby and then thinking, right, how can I find a job that's gonna sustain me. There are still many success stories, I'm sure, of people doing that, but I think, like, overall, I always say to people, I think, like, just understand it's a competitive place. Employers are skeptical. I think the bar to hire in different industries and functions is higher here than probably in London and other parts of the UK. But always remember, and I always say this to people, it's an absolutely awesome place if you can make it work.
Really interesting insight, Andrew. And I get that sense, so maybe slightly more conservative on the hiring, on the decision. So it's less about, I don't know, I'm just, again, broad statements, but maybe in the UK, you're going to roll the dice a bit more on a candidate and think, you know what, that's okay. Here, actually, they're going to scrutinize that there's a lot more thought goes into it. And that obviously means that if you're a little bit off piste, so to say, in terms of the spec or a little bit higher risk profile for the employer, they're gonna probably mark you down a little bit. Very, very good. Your thoughts to add on that? Like, I'm a recruiter, I'm thinking about Hong Kong as a place to work. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that comment. I mean, I think that there's a negative to that, which is it is a square peg, square hole kind of hiring culture here broadly, which does limit diversity, creativity, those type of things. So we're constantly trying to educate clients around that, and often unsuccessfully. But that's a bit of a barrier. I would say things to be aware of. As Andrew said, you definitely need to be culturally sensitive here, but the sort of perception that you will have when you come in is that actually, Hong Kong, it's like the UK, right? It's kind of it's easy to get things done. It's fairly straightforward. A lot of the framework is similar to UK business. If you went to Japan, it would be very clear very quickly what the cultural differences are, and they would be very clearly mapped out and explained to you. And in Hong Kong, you sort of walk in with a sense of, everything's the same, but it takes you about, it took me probably 2 years to really realize what all these subtle differences are about how you should conduct yourself, how you deal with people, how you operate. So therefore, I think it's a bit harder in that respect, because it's a bit under the surface in terms of the cultural differences. And one thing I kind of point out to people, especially around leadership here, which is quite different, I find, is that I think in the UK, if you come in as a director, for example, in a business, and people look to you and they say, right, you're the director, we trust you now until you show us something that means we don't trust you anymore, right? The fact that you've come in as director means, okay, we'll follow you. Whereas in Hong Kong, it doesn't matter what level you come in at, people will, there won't be any trust until you've built it, and you have to build it by showing that you can do the job. So you have to be able to be hands-on and show that you can bring value in the job before you can then gain the trust to step up to lead and coach and move people in the right direction. So it seems to be sort of slightly different kind of route to being a successful leader here as well, I would say.
Very, very interesting. I think on the cultural differences, we could probably spend a lot of time, because that's the stuff that is actually it's fascinating for anybody. There are different ways in which people operate. The unspoken rules, of course, which every culture has, and different things. You can't really learn that off a book. You kind of got to be there and sort of by osmosis get it. And that social EQ, I think, is actually probably one of the most significant things that a recruiter can learn. Okay, folks, that's about it. I think we've got to close it off there. Matt, really great to see you. Wonderful to get your input as usual, as always. And Andrew, thanks for persevering on the tech, man. Really good to get your insight in terms of how the recruiter market is going. I was planning to bring some other folks onto the show, but I believe I might have confused people with sending too many links. So apologies that we weren't able to bring.
Sorry, I was late.
On. No.
We made it work.
Yeah, we made it work. It's been a great show, and yeah, great to have your contributions, Matt and Andrew. No obligations, guys, but I'm going to be around in Hong Kong up until I think Tuesday. So if you've got any window of opportunity, free to do anything, quick lunch or whatnot, let me know. But let me wish you all, a good rest of the day, and a great weekend if I don't get the chance to connect with you otherwise. Thanks for joining, guys.
Great stuff. Thanks everybody. Cheers. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, gents. Bye.
Oh, what interesting folks they were. Always great to speak to local recruiters who live in the area and work in the market. They teach you stuff that you're simply not going to know by reading the press. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. A bit off times, I think, for a lot of the regular viewers of Brain Food Live. We're going to stay off time because guess what? I'm still rolling around in different parts of the world. Next week, we're going to do a double header next week. I'm going to be in Dubai by then, and we're going to do a hiring in the Gulf States 2024. That's on Wednesday, I believe, 12 p.m. local time. And I'm going to stay in the Gulf, but we're going to roll back to talk about referrals and diversity on Friday, this Friday. So double header next week, 2 Brain Food Lives for the price of 1. You can follow the channel here on Crowdcast if you want to get notified of those. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, just follow my channel, just follow the page, I think. And you'll be, as soon as I go live, you'll see it there as well. Okay, everyone, that's about it. Have a good weekend. Thanks for watching.